Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to episode 4 of the Music Mind podcast. Today my special guest is Roger McLachlan. Roger is a master musician and a master of the electric bass guitar. I'll start this presentation by letting you hear just a little bit of a beautiful track called This Feeling. It's from Roger's 2012 album, Roger This, Roger That. Please enjoy my conversation with Roger McLachlan. Well, hi, Roger, and welcome to the Music Mind podcast. It's a real thrill to have you as my 4th guest in the podcast series.
Wow, that's number 4. That's good. That's good. Yeah. And how are you?
You're in good
company. Keeping your head above water up there in Gympie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've had a little bit of stormwater damage here in my studio, but thankfully not flood water. Yeah. Now, our viewers have just heard the first minute or so of a fantastic track off your album, Roger This, Roger That. And the track was This Feeling. What's your memories of, I suppose, that particular song? And also just in general of recording that album, which is 10 years ago now.
I know. And I still think it stands up. It's kind of the kind of material that doesn't necessarily age. I don't know. Look, how that album came about was me basically noodling on Logic Audio with my instruments. I would, a lot of the songs I wasn't kind of struck with wake up one morning and go, oh, I've got this fantastic melody. It was always, I've always struggled with that, and yet I've always got an orchestra running in my head, music, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So it started life as me sometimes, because I worked in part-time retail back then, and sometimes it started with me bringing home a new guitar or a new bass. And the first thing I'd do is I'd come home and I'd put a drum loop on and I'd plug my bass or guitar in and play it and go, oh, okay, feels good. It sounds good too. So some of these songs started with me just jamming, just kind of picking up the bass and playing a part, you know, and then kind of putting it to bed and discovering it, you know, like 5 years later. In fact, there's one song on there, I was rattling around looking for songs, and I came across this track where I'm playing guitar and I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, I don't remember playing this. I must have had somebody in the studio playing guitar. See, that's how good I thought the guitar playing was. Look, in a nutshell, I'll try not to wander off too much. A lot of the songs did start with me just noodling in the studio. Some of the songs, like the opening, the second track, Initiation, was actually, and The Garden were actually kind of written for a musical that I was doing with a friend of mine. He was a musician friend who kind of turned to the Buddhist faith, and he's not a monk, but he might as well be, because he's shaved the head and he wears the robe. But he's still Andrew, the ratbag musician that I worked with, and he said, I want to do a musical about Buddha. You know, and so it was done in 3 parts. It was like each part was 20 minutes. So one was called, and it's kind of like, if you think of Buddha, you think of Jesus Christ. There was the birth of Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha, and the universal love of the Buddha. And so he said, oh, look, I need a song where and I forget the names, where Buddha's mum and dad are wandering through a garden. And I went,
Okay.
I've got it. He said, what about that track that you've got? He said, that would be perfect. So certain things kind of ended up on the album because of other projects, you know.
Other reasons, yeah. Look, the album, when you said you're going to send me the album, part of my mind sort of thought, God, a whole album featuring the bass. You know, in my mind, I was sort of a little bit sceptical of what that album would be like. It's an album that absolutely grows on you. You know, every time I listen to it, it reveals more things. But anyone who, and we're hearing a few tracks today from that album, I think anyone who listens to it will be surprised at, it's almost orchestral how you use the bass.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I was going down that path. There's so many bass players who've done solo albums where they're absolutely flying over the fretboard and showing off and slap happy and crazy. And and you know, I don't think I'm that flasher bass player. I mean, yeah, I can slap and I could take a solo, but really, I've always heard the bass as an orchestral thing, and I've always heard the fretless as my voice, as my singing voice. When I play ba 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 a melody, it's kind of me singing, you know.
And it shows. And I think by the end of this podcast, if the sales of fretless basses don't go through the roof, I'll be very surprised, because the fretless bass, you know, when people think of a fretless bass, they probably think of the upright bass.
Well, probably, yeah.
You know, But you have I think I said to you in an email, it's almost like a cello sound, a beautiful, gorgeous, warm, expressive sound, particularly on the fretless bass. I mean, your other bass playing's fantastic, but it was an eye-opener to me. The tones, the colours, and basically the conversation you have through that, the voice of the fretless bass. It's a credit to you.
Well, look, and obviously anyone that's ever picked up a fretless bass in the last 30, 40 years can't help but be influenced by people like Jaco Pastorius and Alfonso Johnson. And there's been other bass players that have played, even the bass player, and I can't remember his name, the guy that plays on Free's song, All Right Now. Do you remember that song? All right now, baby, I
do remember.
All right now.
Yes,
right.
good song.
Okay, well, the bass player on that, where he plays boom, 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 boom. He takes it's actually a short scale fretless, and yet he doesn't move around and kind of apply. See, I think why you think I sound like a cello, and I do adopt that cello technique where the vibrato on a guitar, when you want to bend a note, you'll bend up like that. And you'll go, even a vibrato can be like that, up, whereas cello is rolling on the pad like a violin, you know, and so you get that beautiful ba-ba-ba, the vibrato. So, it definitely does sound like a cello.
Yeah. Mate, I want to take you right back to your early years. So you've been living in Melbourne, I guess, for what, 50 years or something, or long.
I came to Australia in '74. Yeah, when I was 20 years old. So you can figure out how old I am from that.
Yeah, well, okay. Let's not go there. But your first 20 years was in New Zealand. I want to take you right back to your earliest memories, in particular, your earliest memory of getting excited about music. Maybe not playing an instrument, it might be at one at the same time, but when do you think music really meant something to you that you can remember? Something you wanted to get involved in?
Okay. There's a few pivotal moments. I mean, look, I was born into a musical family. My mother played piano. My mother's mother was a piano teacher. My father is a piano. He was a professional piano player, but not full-time professional. It's hard to be a full-time muso and anywhere.
New Zealand,
a bit easier in Melbourne, maybe if you get lucky.
Yes.
So I guess I was always surrounded by music, but you know, I remember things like, and my sister was 4 years older, so I remember her playing Elvis and Buddy Holly stuff, you know. Okay. So there was that, but here's some pivotal moments. I remember as a kid, I would have been 8 or 9. I used to go around to the next door neighbour's house, who lived up on a hill right on the corner overlooking the bay in Riverton, and in his sunroom he had an old wind-up 78 gramophone.
Wow.
And he would, I don't know why, but I often found myself in there playing pulling out 78 records, putting them on the player, winding them up and playing them, and just going. And I was quite curious about how you could change the pitch of it by speeding up or slowing it down, you know.
Yeah, or putting your finger on the record.
Yeah. I think it might have had a slight pitch control too. There was obviously a null point. So I remember listening to old 78 records. Goodness knows what sort of stuff I was listening to, but it would have been, you know, stuff from the 30s, 40s and 50s. It would have been, could have been musical theatre. It could have been Bing Crosby. For some unknown reason, I can actually picture myself in there playing these records.
And what age would it have been?
I would have
roughly
been
then?
7,
Yep,
6 or
okay.
7.
Yes.
I remember. So there was that. I think by the time I was 7, I had a ukulele.
I was going to ask you
I had a
your first
ukulele,
instrument
and my
was
sister had
ukulele.
one, and we learnt to play
Yes.
songs like "Get Along Home, Cindy, Cindy, Get Along
Yep.
Home," and
yeah.
kind of "You Don't Have to Be a Baby to Cry." I used to sing that song with my sister in harmony, you know, and.
So on the ukulele, just rhythm, or did you muck around a
Oh
little bit
no,
of
just
lead,
played
or,
rhythm.
you know?
My father's upright
Rhythm,
bass
yes.
player, Jack Hopgood, was an Englishman, and he had a banjo ukulele, and he used to play George Formby songs. So
okay.
that was my introduction to ukulele, and he taught me George Formby songs. On my ukulele, yeah. So I got it, which is almost skiffle in a way, you know.
Yeah.
So there was
Yeah.
that, and of course. By the time, and I had piano lessons, I was taking piano lessons from nuns by the time I was 8 or 9 years old.
Did you enjoy that, or was it a bit of a
yes and
a bit of a
no?
drudge?
I didn't like the trap that the hill on the convent, as typical, the convent sat on the top of a hill, and you couldn't ride your bike up there. You had to push it up. So anyway, I would get there, and I was taught by nuns. I can remember one thing, and I think this is when little things that happen. I'm playing piano, and I'm playing along thinking, gee, I'm playing this piece really well. And she almost turned around and went crack on my knuckles with a ruler. She said, "You're not reading that."
Yes.
She said, "You're not playing what's on the paper." So I'm doing my version of it. And in my tiny little mind, I thought, no, I'm not reading it, but I reckon it sounds better.
And isn't that interesting? That is such a common story when you hear of people who they think back to those piano lessons, and it was the discipline. You know, you had to play like
exactly
Mozart's notes were correct. Don't muck around. With
And even at
Mozart's
an early
notes.
age, I would sit on the piano and I'd play a C chord, ba ba ba, and I realised that all these other bass notes could make different chords. And it's the same when I could play a bass note and I could move that C shape around and create all these.
Yes.
Didn't know I was playing a D11 or a D over C
No.
or a B flat over C. Didn't know that, but to my ear,
It's
it
an
sounded
interesting-
great.
And there's a couple of points there that you were already exploring that low end of music. You know, if you put an A in the bass on a C chord, C chord sounds different. You know, like
I didn't know
it's
what the
interesting,
names
yeah.
were, and of course my father was
No.
a piano player, and he had a great love of. He had a very strong left hand, played great stride piano, but also played boogie
Yes.
woogie, dunga dunga
Yes.
dunga dunga dunga, you know, that kind of
Yes.
octave stride thing.
So just moving forward, so the ukulele, mucking around with piano, some sort of piano lessons, which you've got mixed voice. And we're going to throw up some photos. You sent me some photos, fantastic photos. So during the conversation, I'm going to put up different photos. But one that I do want to put up is in 1965, there's a photo of you with your first electric guitar.
Yeah.
And it looks like I can't pick. Do you remember the
I
brand
do,
name?
and I
couldn't
wish I
see
still
the-
owned it. It was a Japanese Tiesco.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a
Tedesco.
It was a hollow body, but it wasn't real thick. It wasn't like
No.
a jazz box, and it wasn't as thin as a 335, just a little bit
No,
thicker.
in between.
Yeah, I wish I
Yeah.
still had that.
It looks like almost like a Gretsch Country Gentleman. That
Well, it was
sort of
that
type
style.
of guitar.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And there's a couple of things that I love in that photo, and our viewers will. One is, you know, you're as proud as punch. Hello,
Here I am.
How good is this? You know, and in the background there's the Beatles' Help, and I also noticed you had a Beatles tie on.
Yeah.
So that 1965, like you're obviously born like in the 50s, but what a beautiful time to come into the world. The beginnings of rock and roll, the whole explosion of guitar-based bands. It must have been a magic feeling.
It was.
Tell us a bit about your memory of Well, obviously the influence of the Beatles there. You seem to be a massive Beatles fan on the day you got your guitar.
And look, the whole family discovered the Beatles. It was a wonderful thing. I remember my father coming home from work one day with a little reel-to-reel tape. He said, "I've got the Beatles' first album on reel-to-reel." So we pop it. I don't know where he got the dub from, because we were so poor we couldn't afford a record player.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Not true. Yeah. We had a record player and actually had a stereo that my father built. He had got components built, this wonderful cabinet with speakers in it.
Wow.
He was a bit of a tinkerer with stuff. Built me my first speaker box, which is possibly in some of those photographs. So we discovered the Beatles together, and it was a revelation. Everything about them were just cool. Yes, they played guitar. I thought they looked cool. Yeah, they wore the suits with the ties, and their haircuts were different. You know. And their harmony, their beautiful harmonies, and the songs weren't too difficult for me to figure out. I mean, even on ukulele and getting my first guitar, you could actually work out the harmonies and work out the guitar chords. So
it's interesting. I mean, I'm a child of the 60s, but I had a similar experience in my time with Chuck Berry and with Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Of course,
the Beatles were a little bit tricky for me. And when you think think their chord structure, a lot of their songs are not like a 12-bar blues. If you think of like
to me,
Day
that's
Trip
what
or
was
something.
cool about it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But for me as a budding little guitarist, I could hear Chuck Berry playing Johnny B. Good, and I thought, if I might be able to do that. And Creedence playing Down on the Corner. My little 9-year-old brain saying, I'm sort of thinking, I might be able to do that, And it was inspiring there.
Yes.
Another photo you sent me, which I love this one. I had the chance to interview Jim Manley as my second guest. Jim's one of the best trumpet players in America. And I asked him, after 50 years as a professional trumpet player, and he's released 20 albums and all this sort of stuff, what's his biggest message about music? And Jim just said it in 2 words: have fun. And I thought, my God, that we miss it. We missed that important element that when we were kids, music was all fun.
Oh, yeah.
And you sent me a photo of Roger's Dodgers. And there's a photo of the 4 of you, the little guy on drums with the glasses, and he's got the Buddy Rich, the correct snare drum, Buddy Rich hand thing. And there was you on your beautiful electric guitar, your little mate on I don't know what sort of guitar, but
he had a Tesco as well.
Well, different shape though, by the looks of it.
Oh no, similar, different scratch plate on it. Yeah, but it wasn't a Tesco.
And your little guy on bass, the neck of the bass is seriously longer than him.
Reach it.
Just the neck.
I know.
But on that photo, if ever there was a photo of some kids having fun with music, I think Roger's Dodgers sum it up to me. Tell us a bit about what's your memory of that band.
Oh, look, I have incredible memories about that band. It started with the drummer when I moved from Riverton. By the time I was 9 or 10 years old, we shifted from Riverton, which is a little coastal town, around the bay to Invercargill. My father's, because he got sick of driving to Invercargill. He was working as a builder and driving in his car into Invercargill to do gigs at night and then driving back home. But driving. Anyway, he got a gig. He got a job, a position working for a printing company. And so he had full-time employment in Invercargill where his band performed 95% of the time. So we moved to Invercargill, the big smoke, I went to school and I met this guy. I was playing ukulele at the time, and we used to do lunchtime concerts in the play sheds. Right, so he would have one drum to hit on, and I had my ukulele, and we'd be singing and playing songs. And it was, at that point when I was 9, 10 years old, we had the play sheds absolutely full of people. Like we were sitting on the seat, and I looked up and I remember thinking, hey, this is pretty cool. We had a sea of people. There would have been 40, 50, 60 kids in there all digging what we were doing. And I looked at Bruce and he said, hey, we should get a band going, So I remember that clearly. In fact, I remember doing a talent quest. We won a talent quest, Bruce Aiken and myself, miming to a Beatles song. Da 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 Da, 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 da,
Yeah.
happy just to be with you. We actually
Yeah,
mimed.
beautiful.
He was on drums, I was on ukulele, singing, miming to a Beatles track, and we won the talent quest.
The judges
They thought,
obviously
these guys
that
are
must
great.
have been allowed
Gee,
in the
these
rules.
guys sound
Yeah,
great. You know?
That's right.
So it's funny, I remember that. And then I remember eyeballing this guitar every Friday night. We would, remember the times when Friday night Mum and Dad would dress up and little Roger had to put his best shirt on and we
Yes.
would go, it was a treat. We would go out walking down the main
Window
shopping, doing stuff. Oh,
We did
dressing
too.
up. The McLachlans are out in town,
Yeah.
you know.
We did the same here. Yes.
It was just a thing
Yeah.
you did. And I remember stopping at Begg's Music and looking, my face pressed against the wall, going, "Oh, look at that guitar! I love that guitar." I would drive on my cycling home from school at 10 years old. I would cycle past the shop and stop and look at it, look at it.
Yeah.
And one day, true story, I drove past I cycled past it and stopped to look in the window, and the guitar wasn't there. And I went, oh no, someone's bought. I remember going home, saying, "Oh, Mum said, what's wrong?" She used to call me Noddy. "What's wrong, Noddy?" I said, "Oh, that guitar in the front window's been sold. It's not there." Now, parents, Mum kept a straight face. So I was convinced. So I remember it would have been. I would have turned 11 in January, so it would have been Christmas when I was 10. So it would have been 1964. Okay. Yeah, 10.
Yeah.
Born in 54, 64. I was 10 years old. Christmas. Swing open the door to the lounge room where all the presents and the Christmas tree is, and there's that guitar. And my little heart, and I'm getting I'm getting emotional. I can feel it now.
Yeah.
It's like,
yes.
that guitar. And that photograph you see of me playing it, and my sister is actually holding the Help album. That's Christmas. If you look, you'll see a hand holding that Help album. It's not behind me, it's beside me.
Mate, I just want to move on. The other photo that I love is your first bass in 1968, which is a Hofner. Not a Paul McCartney one, but a Hofner.
I think it's called a Senator. I think so, that shape, yeah.
So this is really intriguing. Most people, when they end up on bass, whether it's Paul McCartney or whatever, often it's that someone has to play it in the band. It's many times it's not their instrument of choice, but someone in the band has to play bass.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get your story. 2 or 3 years after you got your first guitar, and obviously you were playing your 6-string out in your band. What's the bass story? Why the bass? How did that come into your life?
My father he had an upright bass player, but he loved the immediacy and the accuracy, and he could hear the actual notes that were being played on an electric bass. I remember doing a gig with my father once where I played bass on an electric guitar, so I turned all the treble off and played with a pick, and I palm muted, so I got that bung, 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 and I actually played bass in his band.
Yes.
It was a little function. It was just piano bass. He said, "Oh, look, it's not that important. It's just a little gig he's doing somewhere in a hall for someone." And I would have been, I would have been 11, 12, and I'm sitting behind my father, out of sight, playing bass. So that was the first thing I remember, playing bass in my father's band,
So were you encouraged by your dad
yes and no.
to get a bass?
Dad, I remember Dad just coming home one day with that bass, and I think he paid £20 for it.
Wow. Yeah.
It was obviously second hand. He said, "I bought this bass for you, son," and I don't know why he bought it for me, but I do remember doing some gigs with him, and I was playing bass. Even by the time I was 11 and 12, I was showing the bass player in Rogers Dodgers the bass lines. I would go to my sister had a boyfriend, John Coker, who ended up in Sydney playing bass.
Okay.
And John Coker worked with Mike Pajanic and also worked in the Foster Brothers with John English. A very fine bass player, John Coker, from my hometown. And he used to take my sister out. And he would come round, and I'd go, "John," and I'd drag him away from my sister and say, "John, how does the bass line to Penny Lane go? How does the bass line to..." And he would show me bass lines. He would, and I would...
Isn't that fascinating?
So...
I want to push forward, mate, to Swinging Shepherd's Blues, because you sent me this audio. Now, this must have been recorded. What is this? on your dad's cassette player?
No,
Was this
no,
reel to reel?
this was actually recorded in the NZBC studios in Invercargill. Their own
radio
a
studio,
proper
was it?
recording
Oh,
studio.
proper recording studio.
Yeah, my father used to do broadcasts, on Sunday morning,
Okay.
11:30. And here is the Bill McLachlan Group playing songs from High Society, playing pop songs of the day.
So is this you on electric bass?
Yeah, it's me on
upright
that
bass?
Hofner.
Well, it's fascinating because when I listened, I thought that's Roger playing an upright bass, and then I started questioning, thinking, no, I think you've sort of got an upright bass sound on your electric bass. It comes across like that.
Well,
to
I think
me.
it probably had old flat wound strings on it, so the Hofners can have that kind of what I call that bung sound.
Let's have a listen. Let's have a listen to the Swinging Shepherd's
please.
Blues. That's fantastic, Roger. And your dad was clearly a very good piano player. Swinging Shepherd Blues. I remember playing the piccolo flute up here in Queensland, the town of Nambour, which is famous or infamous for being where Kevin Rudd was born, a former Prime Minister.
Yes.
But don't hold that
I won't
against
hold
them.
that.
But they have a very proud tradition at Nambour that goes way back of fine British-style brass bands. Really good brass bands. And as a kid, not a kid, as a teenager, I was invited to play the piccolo flute, part of Swinging Shepherd Blues with that brass band. And it's a wonderful memory. I just love that song. So when you sent that, that has a memory for me of a great song. And your dad's got a wonderful feel on the piano. And as I say, a very good acoustic bass sound.
Yeah, I guess possibly he was going for that sound. I don't know. I remember being as nervous as hell. It was the first time in a recording studio. And it was kind of like for me, it was like being in Abbey Road. It was a big room we were in, and the piano's there, and the big microphone. You put the headphones on, and you'd peer through the window into the control room, and there'd be, believe it or not, there'd be men with white coats on.
Oh,
like serious,
taking it seriously,
and
which would make you nervous,
well, it does,
more nervous than ever.
And they had these big knobs and things that they turn. And I'm going, once again, my nose pressed against the window, going, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Now we, as a band or musicians, we were not allowed in the control room. So when we listened to playback, they played it through the big Tannoy 15 in the corner.
Oh.
That's how we heard the playback in mono.
That's how you heard
obviously.
the playback. Yeah. So in 1974, you took an enormous leap of faith and moved to, talk about the big city, from New Zealand, you moved to Australia. Tell us about that. What's the background there? Give us the background on the Australian
In a
move.
nutshell, Godspell was touring New Zealand in '73, and it was the second or third version touring of the show. So it wasn't Colin Hewitt or anyone really well known that I know.
No.
I know Diane Faulkner was played the day-by-day lead, and Brian Chimpinski, drummer.
Okay.
Very well known, respected drummer here in Australia, in Melbourne, sessions, stuff like that. He was the drummer. Once again, in a nutshell, this version of Godspell was touring. It got to Invercargill, and my father's trumpet player, who worked for the local newspaper had got wind that the bass player was leaving, and they were looking for a bass player to do to do Dunedin and Palmerston North. So I got early wind of it. So I made contact with somebody and said, look, I'll come and audition. Can I come and audition at lunchtime? Because I had a day job. I said, but can I come and see the show tonight? I'd like to see the show. And then that following day, I would go to the audition. So I went and saw the show, heard songs like Prepare Ye the Way of the Lord, Day by Day, all those songs. Yeah. And so come lunchtime, I jump into my car and head down to the local theatre in Invercargill and meet Rodney Kendall. So we're up there on the bandstand, and he puts the charts in front of me, and he goes, "Okay, let's try Day by Day." And luckily, the charts had chord symbols, you know. So I'm playing Day by Day, doom, 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 following the chord things, you know. Yes. Obviously, I would have been, you know, 74 is about 1920, so I was pretty confident. I mean, more front than Myers, so I was pretty confident playing along. And you know, I'm not reading; I'm remembering what I heard last night.
And using
the chords. So we're playing a few, and he said, "Oh, that's very good. Yes, next song. Oh, yes, that's good." And then he brought up a chart that had no chord symbols on it, and it was in 5/4, and it was just a run of notes to play. It was a particular bass line that had to be played in 5/4.
This is a problem.
And he counts me in, and I fall in an absolute heap. Like I'm sweating bricks here. Yeah. And he kind of stops. He says, "Oh, what's going on there?" He said, you seem to be struggling a little bit. And I said, well, I've got to, at this point, I said, I'll have to come clean. I don't read. You know, I'm not a sight reader. I can't read that. I could figure it out. I knew I'd been sprung at this point. It's like, uh-oh. And he said, and he stopped and he looked at me and he said, you know what? He said, you played the first two songs magnificently. He said, how come you played, that's what he said, how come you played the first two songs so well? I said, well, I saw the show last night and I remembered what I'd heard. And he went, you got the gig. Got the gig just based on that, you know.
Wow. That, I mean, and for our audience, who largely are musicians of all different instruments, but also just people interested in the creative life, I think that's such a really good story there, because, you know, some of the best players in the world
are not readers. That's right. I don't think Paul McCartney reads. I don't know that James Jamerson reads. Tommy Emmanuel is not a reader.
Tommy doesn't. But there's a wonderful, you just talk about Paul McCartney, there's a wonderful clip on YouTube where they talk about Paul McCartney and that he can't read. And Paul's just sitting at the piano and said, he said, I can't read a note of music. And he does basically a harmonised C scale, just like we've all done on a piano. Just keep your fingers the same space. And Paul's just talk, and then he starts humming little melodies, and in those 7 chords, there's lots of ideas for Beatles songs. And he was sort of saying that he still doesn't know what those chords are, doesn't care, but it's the sound. Yeah. So that's one of the questions I was going to ask you. Probably the only time you read music or was forced to. Am I right that, or have you later in your session career had to
absolutely
learn? You would have had to.
And look, just to finish off, how I got to Australia was I finished that. We did that Godspell tour, and then I went back to my day job and a cover band that I had. I was still playing guitar predominantly, a little bit of bass here and there. And I get a telegram, not an email. I got a telegram saying from Rodney Kendall in Australia saying, Roger, Godspell is going to go out on the road yet again for 6 months. We're doing a tour of New South Wales country, a tour of Victorian country, and then we're going to Perth to do a 3-month season. And I went, would you be interested in coming across to Australia to do that? I mean, he could have worked there. There's hundreds of bass players that he could have asked, but he thought about me. He thought, I'd like to get Roger over to do this. So I said, I'd love to. Went to see my boss and said, I've had an opportunity to go to Australia and do this show. Of course, all the other bass players in Invercargill are really jealous because I got the gig initially and other competent bass players didn't get a look in. I snuck in the side door, and got the gig.
And made enough of an impression.
Look, I guess so.
To be asked to come to Australia.
And so that's how I came to Australia. And I remember getting ready to go, and I remember driving up to Dunedin in my Ford Anglia 105E van and going to the music shop up there and thought, well, look, I had a bass. I thought, look, you know what, I should go and get myself a really good bass. Maybe I should go and buy a Fender.
Bass.
So I walked into a music shop in Dunedin, New Zealand, and there on the wall, says he, reaching, and there on the wall was this beautiful jazz bass with a maple neck.
Beautiful.
And so this is a 74, so it's probably a 73.
Yeah.
I'll just maybe move back a fraction. So this is the 73 jazz bass. Obviously it had a pick guard on it and it had frets on it. So, you know, this is the bass that I did Godspell on. This is the same bass that I played all those little river band recordings on, and Stars and Pyramid.
Yeah.
And so I've still got it.
And obviously that just feels like a hand in a glove to you, no doubt.
Yeah.
It just feels like just so much you.
It is, mate, and it cost me $400.
Wow. Was it second hand?
Brand new, $400.
Brand new. Yeah. Wow, mate, that's incredible. So so you do your Godspell thing, 1975, and for our international audience, LRB, the Little River Band, you know, one of the most successful, well, probably along with AC/DC, probably the only band at that level, particularly in America, to conquer America.
Well, I guess so. NXS did pretty well there.
Yes,
and
maybe
not known to a lot of people, Air Supply sold millions of records in America, but LRB seems to have that presence of really being one of the first bands to really kind of go forward
and perhaps one of the first to actually do it.
To really crack it, yeah.
What fascinates me is, you know, in 1968, you got your first ever bass guitar. In 1975, and I'm interested in the story, but you waltz into
an audition
audition for what became one of Australia's most successful bands ever. Like that 7-year apprenticeship. Do you find it remarkable when you look
I do,
back
man.
how
It's
quickly
just
you went there?
I think about those things. You know, me getting that audition, faking my way into finishing the Godspell tour. You know, I had enough front to go in there and go, yeah, I can play this stuff. It's easy. You know, as my catchphrase is drums. Yeah, how hard can it be? You know? Saxophone, easy.
Yeah, easy. That's right. But
look, it is.
It
is, man.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
It's fascinating to me.
I think it's. You know, Graham Goebel would say that our destiny is pre-planned, and a higher person, maybe not God, but a higher person has your life is mapped out for you, and so certain things happen certain times and take you down this path. I don't know about that. I just think that I haven't thought about it too much, mate. I just kind of blunder along, and I have a beautiful look. I've obviously got a reasonably good feel for the bass. I think I realise that secretly that, I've got a good ear and I've got pretty good time and I've got a good groove,
sound.
You know?
A great sound and a great feel. Look, what I want to do, just for the benefit for people who may not be familiar with LRB, because we sort of forget that anyone who is, 40 years or younger won't remember this, but I want to play I want to play the clip you sent me of Emma from Countdown, and the same thing in Australia. A lot of people don't remember Countdown, but for our audience and for those younger ones, Countdown was an institution. I remember we only had a black and white TV here, and we were never like your family. We had enough money, but it's an indication that we saw Countdown on black and white, even though Countdown was the first show in Australia to go on colour. Yeah. We eventually got a colour TV, and it was sort of like, my God, there was a ceremony when we got a colour TV. But I do remember actually watching this clip of Emma on TV.
Oh, wow.
So I'd like to play it now, just to put in context LRB. Let's have a look at Emma from Countdown.
Please excuse the unbuttoned shirt that I'm wearing. It's terrible.
Oh, pretty Emma, you sweet
Okay, Roger. So a lot of things in that for me. You seem to be playing with a plectrum.
Yes, I played with a plectrum all through LRB. Most of it, yeah. I was always a pick player.
In LRB?
Yeah, and a couple of tunes in the second album I might have used fingers, and so it wasn't until the Stars band, Paradise, that I started getting into fingers. But yeah, that was all picked, yeah.
Yeah, and my comment is very defined bass line, almost orchestrated, and that's probably not the right word, but it sounded like, and I'd like to ask you this, was your bass part developed with the band over a period of time, or did you have free rein to play whatever you wanted to on the bass? Say on Emma. Pick one song.
All of the above, really. Now, got to remember that Emma had been recorded. Glenn Shorrock was in a band when he was in England, and in a band called Esperanto, which was kind of like a ELO. There was a big band with a couple of cellos and violin, and he'd recorded that song. He'd recorded Emma, and he'd also recorded Statue of Liberty, which is on the first album. So I think that bass line was pretty much defined, as in it's a bit of a doom 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 doom.
Yes.
It's that kind of doo-wop Beach Boysy type bass line. So I seem to recall that the bass line was pretty much defined. I probably came along and perfected it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a very well thought out bass line. It sounds like not just
Well, it was, and there's no doubt about it. When I listen to it now, I hear the line zoom ba bow 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 bow. That kind of walking bass line back up to the root note, which you do, which a bass guitar is just built to play. And I know you can't see it or hear it, but when you play, yeah.
Actually, that's coming through clear. That's good. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, it's just
dropping rather than going.
Yeah. Oh no.
So anyway, so these are all the options. So I remember little lines like that, and I think I probably did copy it to a degree. But look, some of the bass lines in LRB recordings were heavily arranged, in as much as the band was about like a Steely Dan band, and it's like we would craft these songs and we would come up with parts because we had explored all the other possibilities and kind of decided that this was the way to go, and whether you like it or not, you stick to that bass line. That is the bass line for that song. And people say, oh, isn't that boring? And I go, well, no. If I want to play Lady Madonna from the Beatles, if I'm not playing ba 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 da da, you're not playing the song.
You're not
and it's
playing
the same with Emma. It's the same with all the other bass lines that I've ever recorded or learned. I'm quite. I'm a real stickler for getting my head in there and going, now what is the bass player? What exactly? Down to every little passing note. And when you do that, you really get inside the song, and you usually go, you know what? That's a lot of people say, oh, I hate ABBA songs. I go and have a listen to Dancing Queen. It's one of the greatest bass lines ever conceived it's James Jamerson level of playing.
And it works.
And it works.
And it touches people. And it works for a reason. It's like a great recipe for a cake.
Well, it is. I think
let's not tweak around.
To me, the bass is, and this is a phrase. There's a couple of phrases, and Sting quotes this one. He said, "A chord is not a chord until the bass player decides what note he's going to play."
And how
cool is that?
Left hand on the piano. The right hand's fancy, but the left hand's so important. So thinking about LRB, and you were there for 2 full albums. How many years? 2 years?
About 2 years,
Yeah. So recording and touring?
Just flat out touring and recording. Never stopped.
So what's your greatest memory recording with LRB? I know there'd be many memories, but if you think back now, what do you remember most about recording with that quality of... I mean, LRB were famous for their vocal harmonies, up there with the Eagles and the Beach Boys, anyone, as good as anyone. But the other thing I always liked was their harmony guitar parts, and we heard it in Emma. That, it wasn't just someone playing the lead and someone...
Once again, very well thought out. And when you really had to regurgitate that when you went and played it live. which never worried
So
me.
recording, no. What's your? Just think about those hours and days and weeks in the studio. What's your memory of it?
Wow.
What thinking back? What do you remember about that?
I've got
experience?
some memories which I can't divulge.
No, PG, mate. PG road. Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, I look. For me, it was amazing because I had a love of the Doobie Brothers and the Eagles, and when I went and auditioned for that band, I remember the audition clearly. It was in Derek Polici's front sunroom up in Camberwell, and I walked in and he's got his big white Rogers kit, and all the guitar players are there, and I remember Graham saying, "Oh, Roger, we've got this song called It's a Long Way There." He said, "Look, we'll just start playing it and see what you come up with."
Yeah.
Right? So they started singing, "Hey everybody, yeah," and I'm just like, I'm like,
the
what?
harmonies live.
And then Beef starts playing, crash, and by this time I'm thinking I better play something.
Something.
And Derek plays his fill, and I start playing boom, ba boom, boom, ba boom, boom. I just started playing this bass line, which is really, and I'm letting the cat out of the bag here, which is really a slower version of Long Train Running. The Doobie Brothers, because I heard that G minor, because Doobie Brothers is dang-a-dack, dang-a-dack, and Beav was playing get that slow, and I went, and so look, I'm playing notes out of the blues box, playing in that box, but I started playing that groove and played a couple of other tunes and no prompting from anyone. It was just like, here's the song. What can you bring to the table? But
which is a great way to do an audition, isn't it? Really, you know, just see what he's and was it an instant love affair, or was
it was for me.
I'm
in there pinching myself, going, man, I can't believe I'm in a room of greatness here. Like I recognise straight away that, man, these guys, what incredible singers. Beautiful, in tune. It was all in tune, harmonies, and the guitar playing, and a young Ricky Formosa, because Rick and I are the same age, and he's sitting there playing licks. And I remember vividly standing outside at the front door on the landing talking to Graham, and of course Graham's quite a shy, reserved gentleman, and he said, in a quiet-spoken voice, he said, "Oh, look, thanks, Roger. That was really good. Look," he said, "we've got one more guy that we'd like to audition. We have to fly him down from Sydney." And at that point, my heart sank, and I went, "Oh, no, they're going to audition someone else." And I boldly looked him in the eye and said, "Nah, you don't want to do that. I really want the job. I really love what you guys do, and I'd really love to be in this band." And I just dropped that on him, no fair. And I think I got a phone call or a telegram, I don't know what, because I don't think I had a phone on where I was living. They knew where I lived. And a day later or something, I got this call saying, "Hey, you've got the gig. You're joining a band called Mississippi." Well, they'd come back. They'd been to another short story. They'd been Mississippi had been to England. They broke up. Beeb, Derek, and Graham. Derek being the drummer, Beeb and Graham. They'd got together with Shorik in a room and started singing and swapping songs. And they went, "Wow, we've got a fabulous blend we have here with these three voices." They were looking for a front guy, a singer. So they came back and auditioned. Phil Manning was approached to play in Little River Band. He didn't want to do it, and he knew Rick Formosa, and he said, "You should try it, this young guy from Canada, from Rick Formosa." So that's how Rick got the gig, and of course I got the gig, and all of a sudden we're out playing original songs. We're also doing songs like "Take It Easy," the Eagles, Dobie Gray's "Drift Away," and I think we were playing "Will I" too, a Mississippi song, and a bunch of new stuff. So we're going out playing it, and it was obvious that this band was really known and respected because they'd all been in successful bands long before I joined the band. Shorik's 10 years older than me, so he'd already been in Twilight's, Axiom, Mississippi, all that. And so, we obviously changed the name, and that's because when you drive from Melbourne to Geelong, there's a place called Little River. And Glenn Shire looks up and says, Little River Band, LRB.
And LRB
That's
too.
got a good
LRB.
ring to it.
So
that's how that happened. But look, getting back to being in the studio, I have wonderful memories of, once again, I'm pinching myself. Well, now I'm in a professional recording studio with a great engineer and big monitors, and I'm allowed in the control room this time.
Yes.
Oh, what does that fader do? I've actually got photographs. Luckily, I took photographs of those early days, black and white, of the guys standing around a 16. That first album was recorded on a 16-track.
16-track.
And there's an Opto, locally made machine by Graham Thurkel in Melbourne. That machine, he built that machine.
Okay, built the tape.
Don't know what the disc was called. Anyway, 16-track. When you look at it, it looks so tiny compared to what we have these days. SSL, 96 track. Little 16 tracker. And very easy to fill up 16 tracks of. I've got a harmony or I've got a guitar part, and Ross has said, "Well, we've run out of tracks." Well, we can either bounce. No, we don't want to bounce. Look, there's a gap there. I can drop you in there, but I've got to drop out at that point. Otherwise, we'll all that stuff.
We're so spoiled nowadays.
We are. But I do remember. I think one of the great memories is actually recording "It's a Long Way There," because it's a long song, and trying to remember everything, because we never had nothing was written down. It was all memory.
No.
So trying to perform a note perfect performance for 8 minutes, timing, note choice, everything. And Rick Formosa rugged up in his jacket. He's got a terrible cold. He's all blocked up, and all he wants to do is go home to bed.
Get out of it.
And Graham saying, let's just go for one more take. And I remember Graham having a microphone, and he would verbally direct us through the arrangement. Right? So we'd start saying, okay, we're into the first verse. We probably had a guide vocal. Now we're coming to the breakdown section, so we all played a little bit quieter. And he said, okay, now Rick's solo starts, and he said, okay, build it. Little vocal cues in our headphones to take us through it, I remember that.
I mean, what a fantastic
and getting to the end and playing a ba 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 boom. The last note, and you'd be quiet as a mouse. Then we'd look around at one another and go. And then the guy was going, I think that was a take, guys. Well, was it a take? That was what you hear on that record, apart from some vocal overdubs and maybe the odd little bit of acoustic overdub. What you hear is live.
Played live.
It's all live. Rick's guitar solo, that's live. Me building at the end of his solo, up high, all that stuff. It's all live. No drop-ins. So I have vivid memories of. It takes my breath away thinking about it, because to me, being in the studio at that time was almost sacred. It was like I felt privileged to be in the studio recording these songs, and by hook or by crook, I was going to give my absolute best blood, sweat and tears performance, because it was being recorded, and I didn't want to make a mistake.
It's a moment in
time that was going to be frozen, and here I am, 50 years later, still talking about it,
and rightly
and people
so. And
still enjoying the performance.
And it's the feel. It's a beautiful feel. I just want to take you now, taking that feel of precision in the studio and the beautiful control in the studio. The $1 million monitors. And that. When you take that band out live, how do you deal in the LRB case? How do you deal with, in some respects, trying to recreate the magic of those so well-known songs when you're performing live?
Well, first of all, not playing too loud. As a band, the guitar player, I always got told to turn down. Because bass can just be everywhere. Even if you got your bass amp low, it's in the PA and it's in the room. There was a lot of. I remember Graham spending a lot of time on getting the monitors right. We kind of, as we got better and better, we would spend all our wages on production. We keep adding to the PA, adding to the foldback. So it was really about everyone being very disciplined, not playing too loud, and sticking to your part and not goofing off. You know, Graham had a little black book, and it was amazing. And he wasn't like a taskmaster like James Brown, but he would mentally take notes and go away and think about and always record things and come back and go, oh, Roger, you know, in such and such a song at such and such a point, you're not playing what you played on the record. Could you remember that part you played? Oh, yeah, forgot about that. So he wasn't anal about it, but he wasn't angry. But it was like it was all about the pursuit of greatness, and that's why when you go and see LRB on stage, even now, no matter where you see them, the band doesn't play too loud on stage, and it's all about the singers clearly being able to hear themselves sing, so they can blend and sing in tune. So it was really all about discipline. I think is the big word here. Discipline. You know.
And that's where we'll leave part 1 of this fascinating conversation with the great Roger McLachlan. If you haven't heard the Little River Band's iconic recording of It's a Long Way There, please check it out. It's an amazing moment in the history of rock recording, and we've just heard direct from the bass player from that iconic track. In part 2 of the conversation, we'll get to see and hear Roger play with one of the all-time jazz legends in Australia, the late, great Don Burrows, my favourite musician as a wind instrumentalist. And importantly, you'll get to see and hear Roger talk about recording the bass part on You're the Voice by John Farnham, which was part of the album Whispering Jack, the highest-selling album ever by an Australian artist. And you get to hear it direct from the guy who played the iconic fretless bass part on You're the Voice. I look forward to sharing part 2 of the conversation with you. Bye for now.